Makkah, the center of the earth, a barren, grey desert valley where time itself seems to stand still. Every day, millions of souls turn their faces toward this sacred center. Their hearts are filled with hope, their eyes with devotion. They circle that ancient house known as the Baytullah, the house of Allah. But amidst this sea of believers, shoulder to shoulder with them, stands a guardian whom no one can see. His existence is hidden from the human eye. This guardian was not appointed by any earthly king or president. He was commissioned by the Lord of the throne, Allah Ta'ala himself, to protect this most sacred place on earth. His story is no ordinary story. It is a saga thousands of years old, a tale of an entity who has witnessed the rise and fall of human history, the destruction of empires, and the rebirth of faith. His story is of a world that exists just beyond our sight, yet is incredibly close to us. Today, we are about to unveil one of Islam's most heavily guarded secrets. We will pull back the curtain on a story that connects the visible and invisible worlds in a way that will defy your imagination. Our story begins in a time when this city of Makkah was not as it is today. It was the Ayam al-Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance, long before the arrival of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the people of Arabia had forgotten the worship of the one true Allah, the Holy Kaaba, built as the first symbol of monotheism by Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and Prophet Ismail alayhi salam, was neglected. Its sacred courtyard had become a massive center for idolatry. 360 idols, Lat, Manat, Uzza, Hubal, each one a different deity for a different tribe. The Arabs bowed their heads before these idols of stone and wood, creations of their own hands. They prayed to them, asked them for help, and made sacrifices to them. They had forgotten who the true owner of this house was. They had forgotten the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Obscene poems hung on the walls of the Kaaba, and its courtyard was used for gambling and immoral activities. The Kaaba was still circled in tawaf, but often in a state of nakedness. It was a time of deep spiritual pollution. But no matter what humans did, the sanctity of this house never diminished. Its honor was with Allah himself. What the Arabs could not even imagine was that behind these idols, amidst this noise and ignorance, inhabitants of a different world also revered this house. Alongside the visible world, Allah created an invisible one. He created humans from clay, angels from light, and the Jinn from marajin min nar, a smokeless flame of fire. The Jinn are an independent creation. Like humans, they were given the ability to judge right from wrong. Among them are believers, Muslims, and disbelievers. Kufr, their leader, Iblis, who disobeyed Allah's command by refusing to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, took an oath to misguide humanity with his followers. But not all Jinn followed the path of Iblis. There were many Jinn who believed in the oneness of Allah. They worshipped Allah long before mankind was even created. Our story's hero is one such being. He was an exceptionally powerful and ancient Jinn. His faith was as firm as a mountain. He was one of those Jinn who had worked under Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. He had seen the miracles of prophets, seen the reward for faith in Allah. He had accepted the oneness of Allah long before Islam reached mankind. When Iblis showed arrogance, this Jinn was among those who prostrated. His loyalty to Allah was absolute. The love for Allah in his heart was brighter than the fire from which he was created. In that age of ignorance, when the courtyard of the Kaaba was filled with polytheism, shirk and disbelief, kufr, Allah Ta'ala arranged for a special protection for his sacred house, a protection that human eyes could not see, but which would be capable of repelling the forces of Satan. On one magnificent night, While the people of Mecca were deep in sleep and the desert sky glittered with stars, that believer Jinn received a divine command. This command did not come through any human. It was a direct divine commission. He was told, "You are hereby appointed as the unseen guardian of my house, this Kaaba. Your duty is to protect this house from all impurities, all satanic plots, and every evil force. Your duty will last for centuries upon centuries until my final prophet restores the purity of this house." The weight of this responsibility was immense. He knew he would have to fight alone against thousands of rebellious Jinn and their human followers. He would have to guard the one place that was Iblis's primary target. But there was no fear in his heart, only the peace of obedience to his Lord. From that night, a new guardian of the Holy Kaaba was born. A guardian made of fire, but whose heart was illuminated by the light of Allah. Years turned into decades. The people of Mecca remained busy in their daily lives. They traded, they fought, they wrote poetry, and they worshipped their idols. They had no idea that an invisible wall had been erected around their sacred house. The Jinn guardian began his duty. He watched how Satan and his follower Jinn tried to create chaos in the holy courtyard. They tried to instill even more polytheism into the hearts of the worshippers. They tried to start fights among those circling the Kaaba, but the guardian was vigilant. His very presence was enough to drive away evil spirits. When any rebellious Jinn dared to come too close with the intent to harm the Kaaba, he would reveal his true form, a blazing flame ignited with the wrath of Allah. The followers of Satan were forced to stay away from the boundaries of the Kaaba. Terrified of this guardian, often the people of Makkah would witness strange occurrences. Perhaps an idol would crack for no reason, or an evil sorcerer would suddenly go mad while practicing his magic. They thought it was the curse of a god, but in reality, it was the work of the unseen guardian, protecting the sanctity of Allah's house. He was waiting. He knew this darkness would not last. He was waiting for the promised prophet, the one who would come and smash all these idols and re-establish the monotheism of Ibrahim alayhis salam. But just before the arrival of that prophet, the Kaaba faced the greatest and most visible threat in its history. A threat so large that unseen forces alone were not enough to stop it. It would require the direct intervention of Allah himself. A powerful Christian ruler from Yemen named Abraha, who wanted to divert Arab pilgrims to his own grand cathedral, decided he would raise the Kaaba to the ground. He built a massive army led by a giant elephant, the likes of which the Arabs had never seen. The people of Makkah were terrified. Their 360 idols could not save them. They knew they had no power to stand against this colossal army. But Abraha did not know who he had declared war against. He only saw the unarmed Arabs of Makkah. He did not see the unseen guardian who had been protecting this house for centuries. And he did not know that this house had an owner who could turn the smallest of birds into a mighty army to protect his house. Behind Abraha's arrogance was deep jealousy and political ambition. He had built a magnificent cathedral in Sana'a, Yemen, called Al-Ghaib. His goal was to make the Arabs worship at his cathedral instead of the Kaaba, and to shift the center of trade from Makkah to Sana'a. But the Arabs, despite their idolatry, were not willing to abandon the respect and love they had for the Kaaba. They considered this house of Ibrahim alayhi salam their symbol of pride. It is said that one Arab, showing his contempt for Abraha's announcement, snuck into the cathedral at night and desecrated it. This incident drove Abraham mad with rage. He swore he would grind the Arab symbol of pride, the Kaaba, into dust so no one would ever dare to disrespect his cathedral again. He formed a massive army, thousands of trained soldiers, though not accustomed to the harshness of the Arabian desert, was skilled in warfare. But the main attraction of his army was the elephant, specifically a giant elephant named Mahmud, which marched at the front. The Arabs had never seen elephants used in war. The very sight of this unbelievably powerful animal was enough to strike fear into their hearts. Abraha's army set out from Yemen towards Mecca. Every tribe that tried to stop them was crushed. The news spread like wildfire. Abraham was coming, and no one in Arabia could stop him. Meanwhile, the unseen guardian of the Kaaba, that believer Jinn, was aware of this approaching danger. He saw an earthly power coming to destroy the house of Allah. His duty was to protect the Kaaba from spiritual and unseen threats, but this was a massive army from the world of men. He knew this would require a different kind of preparation. He immediately sent a message to all the believer Jinn tribes of Arabia. Those who were busy worshipping Allah deep in the deserts, in mountain caves, or hidden from human settlements, all answered his call. Within one night, an invisible army of believer Jinn gathered around the Kaaba. Hidden from human eyes, they formed a spiritual perimeter. As Abraha's army drew near Makkah, they began to face obstacles they could not understand. Strange things started happening in the soldiers' camps at night. Their supplies would inexplicably spoil, and their water skins would develop cracks. The elephants became restless for no reason, as if they were seeing something their handlers could not. The Jinn guardian and his companions had begun their assault on the morale of Abraha's army. They instilled an unknown fear into the soldiers' hearts, a fear unlike any they had known. Soldiers began having nightmares of giant beings made of fire chasing them. Abraha's commanders dismissed it as desert fatigue and delusion. But an ominous whisper had already started to spread through the ranks. Finally, Abraha's army reached a place just outside Mecca called Wadi Muhassir. The people of Mecca, seeing the impending doom, fled the city and took refuge in the surrounding mountains. They knew they could not fight this army. The leader of Makkah and the grandfather of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdul Muttalib, went to meet Abraha. Abraha's soldiers had seized some of his camels. Abraha assumed Abdul Muttalib had come to beg for the Kaaba to be spared. But Abdul Muttalib only asked for his camels back. Abraha mocked him. "I have come to destroy the house of worship of you and your forefathers, and you are worried about your camels?" The reply Abdul Muttalib gave is written in golden letters in history. He said calmly, "I am the owner of my camels, so I have come for them. As for this house, it has an owner. He will protect his own house." With these words, he took his camels and left, telling the people of Mecca to watch from the mountaintops how Allah protects his house. The next morning, Abraha ordered his army to attack the Kaaba. He commanded his lead elephant, Mahmud, to advance toward the Kaaba. But that is when the miracle happened. The massive elephant, which was stronger than hundreds of soldiers, suddenly knelt on the ground. The handlers beat it with hooks, pricked it with swords, but Mahmud would not move a single inch toward the Kaaba. If they turned it to face Yemen, south, or any other direction, it would eagerly start walking. But the moment its face was turned toward the Kaaba, it would sit down again. What the soldiers could not see was this: the unseen guardian, the Jinn protector of the Kaaba, was standing right in front of the elephant with his full power. He had taken on his form of fire, which human eyes cannot see, but which the animal's natural instinct could sense. Mahmud saw before it an entity whose power dwarfed Abraha's entire army. It refused out of fear and reverence to advance on the house of Allah. While Abraha's men were busy with the elephant, a strange sight appeared in the western sky. The sky grew dark, but not with clouds. Flocks of small birds, which the Arabs had never seen before, flew in from the direction of the sea. They are called Ababil. Each bird carried 3 tiny pebbles, 1 in its beak and 2 in its claws. These were not ordinary pebbles. They were sigil, stones of hard-baked clay. In the words of the Quran, these birds began to rain down these stones on Abraha's army. What the human histories don't tell you is that the unseen Jinn guardians were assisting in this attack. They were guiding the path of every pebble, making each one act like a guided missile. Whichever soldier was struck by a pebble, it pierced his armor, entered his body, and caused his flesh to melt away. In an instant, the mighty army was annihilated. The soldiers ran in terror, but there was no escape from Allah's punishment. Abraham himself was wounded. He watched his pride, his power, and his army disintegrate before his eyes. He managed to flee back toward Yemen, but his body also began to rot and fall apart. He died a miserable death before he even reached Sana'a. Allah's army, tiny birds and unseen jinn, worked together to turn one of the world's most powerful forces into chewed-up straw. The Jinn guardian of the Kaaba stood amidst the ruins. His form blazed like a flame. He had passed his first and greatest earthly test. The house of Allah was safe, but he knew this victory was temporary. This war was against an external enemy. The real battle was yet to come. The 360 idols inside the Kaaba had not yet fallen. Through this event, Allah had announced to the world that this house had a special status, because in this very year, the great human being who would restore the true sanctity of this house was about to be born. The Guardian's long wait was coming to an end. In that very year of the elephant, that promised light dawned upon Makkah. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the son of Abdullah, was born. The unseen guardian, the Jinn protector of the Kaaba, felt an unprecedented spiritual shift at the moment of his birth. It was a tremor that only the unseen world could feel. That night, the 360 idols inside the Kaaba seemed to tremble in fear. The 1,000-year-old sacred fire of the Persians was extinguished. The minarets of Khusraw's palace in Persia collapsed. But the biggest event was happening in the spiritual realm. The Jinn Guardian saw the gates of the heavens being sealed off to the rebellious jinn and devils. Previously, they could travel near the heavens, eavesdrop on the conversations of the angels, and then come to earth to twist that information for soothsayers. But with the arrival of this prophet, that path was permanently closed. Whenever a devil tried to approach the heavens, a burning meteor would chase it away. The source of satanic knowledge on earth was cut off. The Guardian understood his wait was over. He was no longer just a protector. He was about to become a witness to a revolution. Years passed. He watched the child grow. He saw how the people of Makkah called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Whenever Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered the courtyard of the Kaaba, the Jinn Guardian felt a strange serenity. He watched how even the idol worshippers submitted to the honesty and purity of this one young man. Then came the moment at the age of 40 in the cave of Mount Hira. The first revelation came to him. Read. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned home, trembling from the weight of the divine message, the Jinn Guardian knew that a new era had begun. He watched as one by one people began to accept this new faith. First Khadijah, then Abu Bakr, then Ali and Zaid. In those early days of Islam, when the believers were few, their only safe places of worship were a secluded valley or the private room of a house. But sometimes they would come to the Kaaba under the cover of night. The unseen guardian of the Kaaba would watch these new believers. He saw them ignore the 360 idols and prostrate to the one true Allah. This sight made his 1,000-year vigil feel worthwhile, but the persecution of the Quraysh began. Whenever they saw these new believers, they inflicted brutal torture upon them. The hot boulder placed on the chest of Bilal radiallahu anhu, the martyring of Sumayya radiallahu anha with a spear. All of this happened before the eyes of the guardian of the Kaaba. His body, made of fire, would burn with rage. He had the power to incinerate those oppressors in an instant, but he was bound by Allah's command. This was a human test. He was not permitted to directly interfere in the test of mankind's free will and faith. His duty was to protect the Kaaba, but now a new aspect of his duty was revealed. He could not directly help the believers, but he could create a spiritual shield of protection around them. Many times it happened that an oppressor would raise a stone to strike a companion, only for his hand to inexplicably freeze. Many times when the Muslims were praying near the Kaaba, their enemies simply could not see them, as if an invisible curtain concealed them. The disbelievers thought it was a trick of their eyes, but they did not know that the unseen guardian of the Kaaba was protecting his brothers in faith by Allah's permission. Finally, the persecution reached a point where Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions had to leave Makkah and migrate to Medina, the Hijrah. That night was a difficult one for the guardian. He watched as Allah's greatest creation, the final prophet, was forced to leave his homeland and the house of Allah. The courtyard of the Kaaba was once again left to the idol worshippers. But the guardian knew this separation was temporary. He did not abandon his post. He remained in Mecca, guarding the house of Allah and waiting for the promised day of victory. 8 years passed. Islam grew strong in Medina. After the battles of Badr, Uhud, and Khandaq, the Muslims had become an unstoppable force. Finally, the day arrived. 8th year Hijri, the month of Ramadan. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam advanced towards Makkah with a massive army of 10,000 companions. This was not a campaign of revenge. It was a bloodless victory, the Fath Makkah, or the conquest of Makkah. The Quraysh surrendered without a fight. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered Makkah as a victor. He first performed tawaf, circumambulation of the Kaaba. He held a staff in his hand. Inside and around the Kaaba, the 360 idols still stood. They were symbols of centuries of polytheism and ignorance. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam began to touch each idol with his staff, reciting a verse from the Quran, "Truth has come and falsehood has vanished." Surely falsehood is bound to vanish. What human eyes saw was that with each touch from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's staff, an idol would fall flat on its face. But what human eyes could not see was the great spiritual war raging in the unseen realm. Historians write that these idols were not merely stone and wood. Having been worshipped for centuries, they had become habitats for rebellious jinn and devils. These evil entities clung to the idols as they were their sources of power on earth. As Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was striking down each idol, the unseen guardian of the Kaaba and his believer jinn companions were pouncing on the devils being expelled from them. In the courtyard of the Kaaba, hidden from human eyes, a fierce battle of fire and light commenced. The guardian, who had waited 1,000 years for this very moment, attacked these followers of Iblis with all his might. He began to cleanse every corner of the house of Allah of this spiritual filth. The devils fled screaming. The stronghold of centuries had been destroyed today. When the last idol was smashed, the spiritual atmosphere of the Kaaba changed completely. 1,000 years of accumulated darkness was dispelled in an instant. The Kaaba returned to its original state, pure, holy, a center for the worship of Allah alone. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam then asked Bilal radiallahu anhu to ascend the roof of the Kaaba and give the call to prayer. The Adhan. When that call to monotheism, Allahu Akbar, echoed through the air of Makkah, it was not just the humans, but also the unseen guardian of the Kaaba who breathed a sigh of relief. His primary mission was fulfilled today, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who by Allah's mercy was aware of the visible and unseen worlds, would sometimes tell his companions that Allah has servants made of clay, light and fire, and all of them worship the one Allah. He knew of this guardian's presence. Once Abu Bakr asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam why he sometimes glanced in a direction where no one was present during prayer. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam smiled gently and replied that we have brothers whom we do not see, but who serve the Lord alongside us. The Kaaba was now externally pure, but the guardian knew his work was not over. Smashing idols of stone is easy, but removing the desire for idolatry and the whispers of Satan from the human heart is a constant battle. A new chapter of his duty had begun. Now he had to protect the Kaaba from far more subtle and dangerous enemies, those who come in the form of magic and disbelief. Centuries passed after the passing of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The era of the rightly guided caliphs passed, followed by the Umayyad and then the Abbasid Caliphate. The Islamic Empire was in its golden age. Baghdad had become the world's center of knowledge, science, philosophy, and culture. Islam had spread beyond the Arabian Peninsula to Persia, Central Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe. Across the globe, millions of people faced the Holy Kaaba to pray. Every year during the Hajj season, people of all colors and languages flocked to this holy house. The unseen guardian watched as the prayer of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was fulfilled. But as an empire grows, its enemies become more diverse. The plots of Iblis also become more subtle and deep. During the golden age of the Abbasid Caliphate, alongside the pursuit of science, the practice of dark arts also began in secret. Ancient Babylonian sorcery, secret incantations of Persian fire worshippers, and dark magic from the Far East. All of these had been pushed to the corners by the spread of Islamic monotheism. The practitioners of these dark arts saw that all their power and rituals were fading before a new spiritual current, the epicenter of which was the Kaaba in Mecca. The enemies of Islam did not only attack with swords. There was a group of people who believed that if they could defile or desecrate this spiritual center, the Kaaba, they could weaken the faith of the Muslims. In the mountains of Persia and the ruins of Babylon, a few master sorcerers hatched a terrible plan. They were not ordinary magicians. They were beings who had sold their souls to Satan in exchange for dark powers and long life. They knew that a powerful divine shield protected the Kaaba. They had even heard rumors of the unseen guardian, whom they called the Guardian of Fire. But their arrogance blinded them. They believed that if they combined their powers, they could deceive the Guardian and cast a dark spell over the Kaaba that would destroy its sanctity. Their plan was to deaden the Kaaba, to cast a spell so dark that people would no longer feel spiritual peace there, so that their prayers would not be answered. They prepared for almost a year. They collected objects most hateful to Allah. They crafted incantations that were a direct worship of Satan. Finally, they formed a group. They disguised themselves as merchants, but their real purpose was Hajj, a satanic Hajj. They hid their magical tools, talismans, and enchanted parchments deep within their merchandise. The moment this caravan of sorcerers entered the sacred boundary, the Haram of Makkah, the unseen guardian of the Kaaba, felt a sharp, piercing discomfort. Among the thousands of pure, faithful souls, these few souls were like rotting wounds. No light emanated from their bodies. Instead, a dark, foul, smoke-like energy poured out, which only the Guardian's eyes could see. The Guardian was immediately on high alert. He understood these were not ordinary sinners. They had come with a planned intention to defile this holy place. The Guardian ordered his unseen companions of the believer Jinn to keep a strict watch on this new group. The sorcerers entered the courtyard of the Kaaba. They behaved just like ordinary pilgrims. They performed tawaf. They prayed, but they could not fool the Guardian's eyes. The Guardian saw that their tawaf was not an act of worship, but a way to measure the spiritual energy fields around the Kaaba. With each circle, they were secretly drawing symbols on specific parts of the Kaaba's wall, invisible to humans, but glowing like black fire in the Jinn world. They were waiting for a specific night to perform their main ritual, a night with no moon, when the sky was covered in clouds. A few days later, that night arrived. In the dead of night, when most pilgrims were asleep, the group of sorcerers gathered in a secluded corner of the Kaaba. They thought no one could see them in the darkness. They took out their talismans, animal bones, and enchanted parchments. They formed a circle and began chanting their terrifying incantations of disbelief. They were invoking a satanic power with their leader at the center. The very instant the first word of dark magic was uttered from their lips, the unseen guardian of the Kaaba appeared in his full form. At first, the sorcerers felt nothing. But suddenly the temperature in that specific spot began to drop rapidly. On that hot summer night, their bodies began to shiver with cold. The air became heavy, filled with an unimaginable pressure, as if an invisible mountain was crushing them. The sorcerers looked on in panic as their magical tools stopped working. The talismans that had been glowing with evil energy were now as lifeless as ordinary stones. They tried to speak, but they couldn't. Their tongues felt stuck to the roofs of their mouths. An unknown terror gripped their souls. Then they saw him, not in human form, but in his true form. A massive entity, a pillar of smokeless fire, stood beside the wall of the Kaaba. His two eyes glowed like burning coals. The Guardian's presence was so overwhelming that the weak devils the sorcerers had summoned had fled in terror in an instant. The Guardian's voice did not create sound waves. Rather, it struck their minds directly like a clap of thunder. The voice said to them, "O enemies of Allah, did you think this house was unprotected? Did you think you could defile the house of the Lord with your filthy incantations? Your arrogance today will be your doom." The unseen Guardian raised his hand. The enchanted parchments and talismans the sorcerers had brought burst into a strange green flame and turned to ash in seconds. The sorcerers wanted to scream, but no sound came from their throats. They saw the Guardian of Fire advancing toward them. What they saw next cannot be described in words. They saw a minuscule reflection of the wrath of Allah. The Guardian did not inflict any physical harm upon them. He simply prayed to Allah, "O my Lord, give them a punishment that purifies their hearts and becomes a sign for future generations." That very night, the entire group of sorcerers lost their sanity. They became madmen. The next morning, the servants of the Kaaba found several foreign merchants sitting in the courtyard, behaving like madmen. They weren't speaking. They weren't eating. They were just staring blankly at the Kaaba and muttering. They remained in this state for 40 days. For 40 days they did not sleep or eat. They just kept muttering praises of Allah and begging for forgiveness for their sins. When their consciousness returned after 40 days, they were no longer the same sorcerers. All the dark magic and arrogance had been wiped clean from their hearts. The encounter with the Guardian and the miracle of the house of Allah had shaken their souls so profoundly that they became the most devoted followers of Islam. they spent the rest of their lives in Mecca, forgetting all the magic of their past lives. They dedicated themselves to the knowledge of the Quran and Hadith. It was they who later described the terrifying experience of that night. The story of an unseen guardian who is ever ready to protect the house of Allah. This incident spread like wildfire among the Jinn world and among humans who were aware of the spiritual realm. The followers of Iblis understood that the Kaaba was not just a house of brick and mortar. It was a living fortress guarded by an entity who was impossible to defeat. But the Guardian's duty was not over. After the Abbasid era, new dangers gathered over the Muslim world. From the far west came the Crusader armies, and from the east came the horsemen of the Mongols, who brought Muslim civilization to the brink of annihilation. The Guardian now faced a new challenge: how to protect this holy house from the horrors of global warfare. Several centuries of relative peace passed in the Muslim world after the incident with the sorcerers. But the unseen guardian of the Kaaba did not relax his watch for a single moment. He knew that Iblis's plots never cease. If he could not defeat the Kaaba through the spiritual world, he would try to use the human world to strike at its foundations. At the beginning of the 12th century, the Guardian's fears came true. A new storm approached from the west. A massive army of millions of soldiers, carrying the cross as their banner, swept in from Europe. Their goal was to capture the Holy Land of Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque from Muslim hands. This is known in history as the Crusades. Although their main target was Jerusalem, not Mecca, the Guardian of the Kaaba understood that this was not just a war for land. It was an all-out conflict between two civilizations, two faiths. If Jerusalem fell, the spiritual morale of the Muslim world would shatter, and the shock waves of that collapse would strike the walls of this sacred house in Makkah. The Guardian was forced to expand his jurisdiction. He was no longer just the protector of the Kaaba. He became an invisible intelligence chief for the Muslim world. He established a powerful communication network with the believer Jinn in Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. As the Crusader armies advanced on Antioch and Jerusalem, the local believer Jinn would send reports of the enemy's positions, their plans, and the activities of their own sorcerers who accompanied the Crusader army back to the Guardian in Mecca. The Guardian would analyze this information and arrange to convey that information to righteous Muslim commanders like Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi through dreams or ilham, divine inspiration. In the accounts of many historical battles, there are mentions of incidents where the Muslim army suddenly learned of the enemy's secret plans or attacked from a direction the enemy could never have imagined. People called these battlefield miracles, but they did not know that behind them was an unseen Jinn network operating under Allah's command, with the Guardian of the Kaaba at its center. The Guardian's primary duty, of course, remained Makkah. During the turbulent times of the Crusades, many Crusader knights and spies tried to enter the Arabian Peninsula disguised as merchants or travelers. Their goal was to gather intelligence on the source of Muslim strength, the Kaaba, or if possible, to desecrate the holy site. But none of them succeeded. Whenever a spy approached the sacred boundary of Makkah with impure intentions, he would face a strange resistance. The spiritual shield created by the Guardian of the Kaaba would exert unbearable pressure on their minds. The spies would begin to suffer from intense mental agony. They would see terrifying visions that were enough to drive them mad. Many would get lost and die, wandering in the desert, or their hearts would be filled with such an inexplicable terror that they would flee in panic without taking another step toward Mecca. Before the wounds of the Crusades could even heal, A cataclysm approached from the east, which made the Crusades seem pale in comparison. At the beginning of the 13th century, from the steppes of Central Asia, the Mongol hordes, led by Genghis Khan, descended upon the Muslim world like an unstoppable storm. They were not like the Crusaders. They had no religious conviction, only a thirst for destruction. They razed one Muslim city after another, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khorasan, to the ground. They massacred millions of Muslims without mercy. The guardian of the Kaaba saw the soul of the Muslim world screaming in terror and pain. The year was 1258. Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulagu Khan, advanced on the heart of the Muslim Caliphate. The Abbasid capital, the dream city of Baghdad. Baghdad was the capital of knowledge and science in the world at that time. The city's Beit al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom, held millions of priceless manuscripts. Hulagu Khan laid siege to Baghdad. After the caliph surrendered, one of the most shameful chapters in history began. The Mongols ravaged Baghdad for 40 days. They killed every man, woman, and child in the city. They threw all the books from the House of Wisdom into the Tigris River. It is said the waters of the Tigris River ran black with the ink of the books and red with the blood of the slain. The Muslim Caliphate had fallen. The guardian of the Kaaba, even while in Mecca, could feel the fall of Baghdad in the spiritual realm. It was a massive earthquake. The cries of millions of martyred souls and the lament of lost knowledge made the air of Makkah heavy. The Mongols' next target was Syria and Egypt. And after that, the Arabian Peninsula, the Hijaz, Makkah, and Medina. The Guardian realized this was the greatest test of his watch. Abraha's army was nothing compared to these Mongols. If the Mongol army entered Mecca, they would not just destroy the Kaaba, they would create rivers of blood in this holy land. There was very little time. The Guardian gathered all his spiritual energy. He called upon not only the believer Jinn of Arabia, but all the believer Jinn tribes who had fled the destruction in Persia and Central Asia to defend Mecca. Together, they created an impenetrable spiritual fortress around Makkah and Medina, the two holy cities. This was not a magical barrier. It was a wall of light, built from the collective prayers of millions of Jinn to Allah. When the advanced guards of the Mongol army began to move toward the deserts of the Hijaz, they immediately felt the presence of this invisible wall. The Mongols, who were highly superstitious and believers in shamanism, nature worship, began to experience things they had never encountered before. Their horses, which were dearer to them than their own lives, refused to take another step upon reaching the border of the Hijaz. The horses became agitated, as if they were seeing something invisibly terrifying. The Mongol commanders, who had never felt fear even after shedding rivers of blood, began to have horrific nightmares. They dreamed of giant beings made of fire advancing on them, saying, "This is the protected land of Allah. If you enter here, your fate will be worse than Abraha's army." The desert weather suddenly became even more hostile. The Mongols, who came from cold climates, could not bear the desert heat. Strange diseases began to spread among them. Their shamans, priests, performed their rituals and found that the spirits of this land, according to their belief, were extremely powerful and were not willing to accept any outsiders. They advised Hulagu Khan not to advance on this cursed land. Historically, though the Mongols decimated Baghdad and Syria, they never attacked the core of the Arabian Peninsula, Makkah or Medina. They diverted their advance toward Palestine, where they faced their first ever devastating defeat at the hands of the Mamluk Sultan Baybars at the Battle of Ain Jalut. Human history says the Mongols avoided the Hijaz for geographical and military reasons. But the history of the unseen world says it was due to an impenetrable spiritual defense created by the guardian of the Kaaba, which protected the house of Allah from the most barbaric force in history. The guardian was victorious once again. The caliphate was destroyed. The Muslim world was fractured and wounded. But the epicenter of Islam, the Kaaba, remained untouched. But he knew the danger was not over. The modern age was approaching, and the trials and plots of that age would be far more complex and dangerous than any sword or spell. Several more centuries passed after the Mongol cataclysm. The Muslim world entered a new era. The Ottoman Caliphate rose and fell. European colonial powers carved up the Muslim world. Then came the 20th century, the age of technology, the age of world wars, and the age of ideological conflict for the unseen guardian of the Kaaba. This new era brought a completely new set of challenges. The enemies no longer arrived on elephants, nor did they chant magical spells. The new enemies came disguised as ideologies and technology. It changed the entire environment of the Kaaba. The Masjid al-Haram underwent massive expansion. The ancient mud brick buildings and oil lamps were replaced by towering minarets, vast marble courtyards, thousands of electric lights and air conditioning. A modern infrastructure was built to handle the congregation of millions. The Guardian had to adapt to this new reality. His fiery being, accustomed to the desert heat, now continued its duty in air-conditioned environments. He observed how electricity and mechanical noise created a new kind of spiritual atmosphere. But his core duty remained the same, to protect the sanctity of Allah's house. As the 20th century passed and the 14th Hijri century began, an event occurred that was more horrific than the attacks of Abraha, the sorcerers, or the Mongols, because this attack did not come from the outside, but from within. This was November 1979, the very first day of the new Hijri century, 1400. The Muslim world was celebrating the dawn of a new century. But as the morning light broke, the sound of gunfire echoed from inside the Masjid al-Haram. A group of extremists, led by a man named Juhayman al-Otaibi, seized control of the Masjid al-Haram. Misinterpreting certain prophecies, they declared one of their own as the Imam Mahdi. They barricaded the gates and took thousands of worshippers and pilgrims hostage. For the unseen guardian of the Kaaba, this was the darkest moment of his 1,000-year watch. The enemies this time were not disbelievers. They claimed to be Muslims. They were threatening to shed the blood of Allah's servants in the house of Allah itself. They had turned the sacred courtyard of the Kaaba into a battlefield. For the first time, the guardian's enemies were inside the walls with him. It was an unimaginable spiritual crisis. These rebels had violated the sanctity of the Kaaba, the most forbidden act within a sacred month. The Guardian was in a dilemma. His duty was to protect the Kaaba, but how could he intervene when this conflict was entirely a part of mankind's internal trial, fitna? He saw the rebels take over the minarets and set up sniper positions. They used hostages as human shields. When the Saudi security forces began their attempt to retake the mosque, a terrible battle erupted right in the holy courtyard. The Guardian's rage ignited his fiery being, but he could not overstep the command of Allah. He could not directly incinerate these humans, but he devoted all his energy to his primary duty, protecting the Kaaba itself. He immediately created a powerful invisible shield directly around the Kaaba itself. The purpose was twofold. First, to protect the physical structure of the Kaaba from the violence, and second, to limit the spiritual damage to the holy site. In the 2-week siege that followed, many hostages who were later freed spoke of strange occurrences. They spoke of how countless bullets fired by the rebels would miraculously change direction just before hitting the Kaaba's walls. How grenades exploding near the Kaaba would have their shrapnel muffled, as if an invisible wall had absorbed the blast. The Guardian was using his full power to keep the fighting away from the main structure of the Kaaba. At the same time, he was helping the innocent hostages. Whenever a hostage was in the direct line of fire, he would create a strong urge in their heart, causing them to suddenly move and be spared. People thought it was their luck or mere coincidence. But they didn't know that an unseen guardian of Allah was fighting to save their lives. This siege was a spiritual catastrophe. The bloodshed and violence that took place in the sacred courtyard created a deep, negative spiritual residue. Finally, when the Saudi government received a fatwa, religious decree, from the scholars to conduct a military operation inside the Holy Haram, the Guardian knew this nightmare was about to end. As the final assault by security forces began, the Guardian and his believer Jinn companions engaged in a different kind of warfare. They shattered the psychological resistance of the rebels. The extremists who had been fighting with blind conviction were suddenly gripped by an unexplainable terror. Their morale collapsed. On the other hand, the members of the security forces felt as if an unknown power was guiding them in the vast and complex underground corridors of the mosque where the rebels were hiding. It was as if an unseen hand was guiding the soldiers down the right paths. After 2 weeks, the horrific siege came to an end. The Masjid al-Haram was liberated. Humans came and cleaned the bloodstains from the Kaaba's courtyard and removed the broken glass. But the unseen Guardian was looking at the damage that human eyes could not see. The spiritual atmosphere of this holy place had been deeply polluted. After the siege ended, the Guardian's real work began. He now had to spiritually cleanse the holy site. For over a month, he engaged in special worship and supplication to Allah, working to remove the remnants of that negative energy. He invoked the mercy of Allah to restore the spiritual purity of this sacred house so that the worship of future pilgrims would not be affected by the shadow of this dark event. The Guardian had passed the most difficult test of the modern age. He understood that the wars of the future would not be of swords or guns, but of faith, ideology, and the preservation of sanctity. And his duty was now not just to protect the Kaaba from physical attacks, but to constantly protect its spiritual environment from the doubts, sins, and negative energies of the millions who came to visit. The wounds of the 1979 siege healed. The unseen Guardian of the Kaaba, by divine command, once again purified the spiritual atmosphere of the sacred house. But he knew this work of purification would never end. The modern age brought a new reality. Every year, millions of people come for Hajj and Umrah. It is the largest spiritual gathering in human history. But when these millions of people come, they do not just bring their devotion, hope, and prayers. They carry with them the entire burden of their lives, the darkness of their sins, their hidden fears, worldly anxieties, jealousy towards others, business worries, and 1,000 doubts. All of this enters the courtyard of the Kaaba with them. The Guardian of the Kaaba, whose vision can see these subtle layers of the human heart, observes this silent flow of spiritual pollution. He sees how the darkness of one person's sins can become a barrier to the concentration of the worshipper next to him. He feels how the noise of worldly thoughts tries to disrupt the serenity of this holy place. His duty is no longer just to fight swords or magic. His new and much harder duty is to keep the spiritual atmosphere of this house under a constant filtering process. He maintains an invisible field around the Kaaba, not a physical barrier, but a field of spiritual purification. When millions of hands are raised in prayer, the guardian ensures that those prayers are not obstructed by any negative energy. He cloaks himself in the power of Allah's names, the ones that purify. When a sinful servant comes to the Kaaba and repents for his sins, the spiritual darkness created by that sin is absorbed by the guardian and incinerated in the light of Allah's mercy. Whether that person's sin is forgiven is a decision for Allah alone. But the negative energy created by his sin is prevented from polluting the environment of the Kaaba. Alongside this constant spiritual cleansing, the guardian performs another vital duty: guiding the lost souls. This duty has two aspects, one physical, the other spiritual. The physical aspect deals with people who are literally lost. In the sea of people during Hajj, where millions are dressed in identical clothes, it is very easy to get separated from one's loved ones. The guardian has seen countless such incidents. Once a very elderly woman who had used her life savings to come for Hajj from a distant village became separated from her son. She didn't speak Arabic, nor did she understand English. In that ocean of people, she began to cry in panic. She was disoriented and didn't know the way back to her group's tent. The guardian of the Kaaba felt the terror in her heart. He saw how a simple believing soul had become helpless. He couldn't appear before her, but he arranged for her help. The guardian created a gentle spiritual nudge or inspiration in the old woman's heart. She suddenly felt she should walk to her right. For no apparent reason, she began walking in that direction. After just a few steps, she saw a volunteer who, miraculously, was carrying the flag of her country. That volunteer recognized her and arranged to take her back to her camp. The old woman thanked Allah for this miraculous help. She never knew that an unseen guardian of Allah's house had arranged this path for her, but the guardian's real work is with those who are not physically, but spiritually lost. Many people come to the Kaaba whose hearts have turned to stone from the weight of their sins. They come because they have nowhere else to go. They consider themselves so sinful that they have even become hopeless of Allah's mercy. Once a man came from a distant land for Umrah. He had committed such terrible sins in his youth that he was disgusting even to himself. He entered the courtyard of the Kaaba, but his legs felt heavy. He saw thousands of people circling the Kaaba, crying and praying, but he felt unworthy of this sacred place. He hid in a corner of the courtyard behind a pillar. Satan was whispering in his heart, "This place is not for a sinner like you. There is no forgiveness for you. Go back." He didn't even have the courage to look at the Kaaba. His heart was full of despair and self-hatred. The guardian of the Kaaba saw this broken heart. He saw a soul standing on the brink of destruction, one that needed help right now. The guardian's heart feels a special sympathy for such souls, because he knows that Iblis's greatest victory is to make a person despair of Allah's mercy. The guardian silently approached the man. He created a special spiritual field around him. This field blocked the whispers, waswas of Satan. The man suddenly felt the heavy air around him lighten. The unbearable pressure inside his chest eased. The guardian then inserted a single thought into his heart. Not his own thought, but an echo of Allah's promise. "My mercy prevails over my wrath." The man was startled. He wondered where he had heard that. He lifted his head and looked at the Kaaba. At that moment, tears began to flow uncontrollably from his eyes. Tears he had held back for decades. He felt as if the owner of this house was calling him. All his shame, all his fear, all his arrogance began to melt away with those tears. He couldn't hold himself back any longer. He came out from behind the pillar and joined the flood of people performing tawaf. The guardian stayed with him, invisibly. He watched the man circle the Kaaba, weeping like a child. With every circuit, a layer of sin seemed to peel away from his soul. When he completed his 7 circuits and stood to pray behind the Maqam Ibrahim, station of Ibrahim, he was a completely different person. His heart was light, at peace, and filled with gratitude to Allah. He felt that Allah had accepted his repentance. He left Makkah a new man, with the pure feeling of a newborn. He spent the rest of his life in the worship of Allah and in service to people. He would never know that on that night, an unseen guardian of the Kaaba had pulled him from the pit of despair and placed him before the mercy of Allah. In this way, the guardian of the Kaaba continues his duty every day, every moment, hidden from millions. He doesn't just protect the stones of the Kaaba. He protects the faith that revolves around this house. The duty of this unseen guardian of the Kaaba is not limited to the city of Makkah or the Masjid al-Haram. This sacred house is the epicenter of the entire Muslim Ummah, and therefore its guardian's watch extends across the entire world. It is not possible for him alone to be aware of every subtle conspiracy against Islam in every corner of the world, or the cry of every believer's heart. This is why, for centuries, he has operated a global network of believer Jinn. The Jinn, due to their nature, can travel faster than humans and can access dimensions unimaginable to mankind. Believer Jinn live in every country, every city, and every community. They live alongside humans, but invisibly. The guardian of the Kaaba is the central hub of this invisible network. As the protector of the Haramain, the 2 holy mosques, he holds a special position of honor in the Jinn world. When a dangerous deviation, bid'ah, in the name of Islam begins to spread in a country in the Far East, the local believer Jinn immediately relay that news to the guardian in Makkah. When a long-lost important manuscript of Islamic history is about to be discovered in the dusty basement of a European library, the guardian learns of this information. This network does not operate through magic. Rather, it is a disciplined system bound by faith. The guardian uses this information to protect the Muslim Ummah from greater harm. The most important part of this duty is to protect knowledge and its scholars. Throughout history, the guardian of the Kaaba has kept a special watch over the great scholars, ulama, imams, and saints of Islam. These are the people who are the inheritors of the knowledge of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Iblis's primary goal is to corrupt this knowledge or to misguide its bearers. The guardian watched how great imams like Imam Abu Hanifa, may Allah have mercy on him, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, may Allah have mercy on him, were persecuted by the caliphs of their time. Yet they did not deviate an inch from the truth. In those difficult times when the imams were imprisoned, the guardian, by Allah's command, would send his unseen companions to give them spiritual company. The scholars might have thought that the immense patience and mental strength they felt in those difficult moments was purely the mercy of Allah, and it truly was. But they did not know that Allah's mercy sometimes comes in the form of an unseen companion who would whisper in their ear, "Be patient, Allah is with you." It is said that Imam Abu Hanifa, may Allah have mercy on him, once noted in his personal writings that when he was pondering a complex issue of fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, late at night, he would sometimes feel the presence of a righteous entity whose arrival would make the solution to the problem clear to him. Even when Imam Bukhari, may Allah have mercy on him, was compiling the Sahih Hadith from millions of narrations, the followers of Satan tried relentlessly to mislead him. They tried to create confusion in his memory, to trick him into accepting a weak narration as authentic. But a group of believer Jinn, assigned by the guardian of the Kaaba, would maintain a shield of light around the great Imam. protecting his heart from these satanic whispers. In the modern age, this war of knowledge has taken a new form. Books are no longer just burned. Now, false information and distorted fatwas are spread across the internet in an instant. The Guardian's duty has also changed. He now inspires those scholars who are working to protect the true knowledge of Islam in this digital age. When a sincere scholar or researcher gets stuck on a point while researching an Islamic topic, when he is missing a crucial argument, the Guardian instills an ilham, inspiration, in his heart. That scholar might suddenly remember a book he read many years ago, or an argument will dawn on him that shatters the web of doubt spread by atheists or heretics. The researcher thinks it is his own thought, but he does not know that from Makkah, an unseen guardian is aiding him in his intellectual jihad. A startling example of this protection of knowledge was the preservation of ancient manuscripts. When the Mongols were destroying the libraries of Baghdad and throwing the books into the Tigris, the guardian of the Kaaba performed an impossible feat. He knew he could not stop the human rampage, but he could protect the knowledge. Just before the destruction began, he commanded the believer Jinn of Baghdad. That night, they miraculously moved countless copies of the most important and rare manuscripts. Not only that, he inspired the scholars of Baghdad to bury those books underground in various parts of the city before they could be destroyed. Many years later, when the Mongol storm had passed, a new generation of scholars, either through dreams or by chance, rediscovered those buried troves of knowledge. This is how the knowledge of Allah's book and the Sunnah of his Prophet ﷺ was saved, even from the rampage of a barbarian nation. Even today, the Guardian of the Kaaba continues this same work. He connects the faithful scholars scattered across the world with an invisible thread. He ensures that the core knowledge of Islam can never be corrupted. He is not just the guardian of the brick-and-mortar Kaaba. He is the guardian of the knowledge that emanates from it, but a new thought now occupies the guardian's mind. He knows he has performed his duty for thousands of years. But the prophecies of the end times are not unknown to him. He knows a time is coming when all these walls of protection will fall. He is waiting for that final test, when his duty will enter a new and perhaps final phase. This unseen guardian of the Kaaba, with his being of smokeless fire, has watched time flow for thousands of years. He has seen the rise and fall of human faith. He has seen Abraha's elephants, the swords of the Crusaders, the barbarism of the Mongols, and the extremism of the modern age. In every test, he has protected the house of Allah. But in the vast knowledge gained over his long existence, certain prophecies are preserved that trouble him more than any enemy. These are the prophecies made by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself about the Akhir Zaman, the end of time. The Guardian can see with his spiritual sight that the world is changing. He sees the signs he was told about. He sees how faith is being lifted from people's hearts, how worldly glamour and materialism are affecting the minds of even the pilgrims who come to the Kaaba. His duty, that spiritual filter, has now become 100 times more difficult. He now has to fight against an invisible filth that is more subtle than sin, apathy. He knows the major signs of the end times will appear one by one. He knows that a great deceiver, the Dajjal, will emerge, claiming to be God and traveling to almost every corner of the earth. And he also knows the prophecy, the Dajjal, with all his power and satanic abilities, will be unable to enter two cities, Medina and Makkah. The guardian of the Kaaba is preparing himself for that day. He knows that when the Dajjal approaches the boundaries of Mecca, Angels will descend from the heavens with drawn swords to protect the city. But alongside that army of angels, on this earth, the first line of defense by Allah's command will be formed by this unseen guardian and his army of believer Jinn. He will be the first spiritual wall against which the evil energy of the Dajjal will collide. This will be one of the final tests of his vigil. But there is a deeper, more complex prophecy, one that creates a different kind of feeling in the Guardian's heart. This prophecy is in direct conflict with the core purpose of his existence. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that in the very last days, when faith has been completely lifted from the earth, when not a single person is left to say the name of Allah, then this Kaaba itself will be taken away. And this will not happen through a heavenly force or a natural disaster. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ specifically said that in the very last days, a man from Abyssinia, Ethiopia, known as Du As-Suwaikatain, the one with thin legs, will come and dismantle this Kaaba brick by brick and loot its treasure. This prophecy weighs heavier on the guardian of the Kaaba than the threat of 1,000 Mongol armies. His entire existence, his 1,000-year vigil, his relentless guard, all of it has been to protect this house. And the prophecy says that in the end, an ordinary man will come and tear it down, and no one will stop him. For the first few centuries, the Guardian could not understand the meaning of this prophecy. He thought that perhaps he would be the one to, by Allah's command, incinerate this Du As-Suwaikatain. But thousands of years of worship and proximity to Allah have granted him a deep wisdom. He understands now. He understands that his duty is not to protect the Kaaba forever. His duty is to protect it for as long as its purpose exists. As long as even one person on earth says La ilaha illallah and turns to this house, its spiritual power will remain, and the Guardian will remain at his post. But in those final days, when the Quran is lifted from people's hearts, when there is no one left to pray towards this Kaaba, then this structure of brick and mortar will lose its purpose. It will become just a physical object, holding no spiritual weight. Allah will no longer keep his house in this impure world. The arrival of Du As-Suwaikatain will be a sign from Allah that time is up. And on that day, the unseen guardian of the Kaaba will not interfere. He will with all his might step aside. His 1,000-year duty will have come to an end. He will watch a greedy man tear down the very house he stood before Abraham's elephants to protect, the very house he fought sorcerers to defend. He will not weep, because he knows this is not a defeat. It is the completion of a cycle. It is the fulfillment of a divine decree. The sacred trust that was given to him, the time has come to return it. But until that day arrives, until this very moment, the guardian of the Kaaba is steadfast at his post. His fire has not dimmed for even a second. He knows his duty is not over. The trial of the Dajjal is yet to come, and as long as he has strength in his being, if any evil eye dares to look toward the house of Allah, he will pounce with everything he has. The final chapter of his long watch has not yet been written. And until his duty is complete, his story too is not over. This story of the unseen guardian of the Kaaba is not an ancient folktale lost to history. It is an ongoing reality. At this very moment, as millions of believers circle the Kaaba in Tawaf, that guardian is present among them. He has not abandoned his post. A pilgrim today, deep in concentration, immersed in the worship of Allah, might feel a strange warmth beside him, or an unexplainable sense of peace. He might think it is the blessedness of the holy place. He will have no idea that standing right next to him is a fiery servant of Allah who has been guarding this house for thousands of years. That guardian is still watching. He sees the pilgrims who have left all worldly attachments behind, mad in their love for Allah. He sees the repentant souls bowed down by the weight of their sins. And for all of them he prays for Allah's mercy. This guardian story reminds us of a great truth. This visible world is not all there is. Allah's creation is vaster and more complex than our imagination. Veils, light, and fire, all are His creation, and all are subservient to His command. This Jinn guardian is just one small sign of Allah's unseen management of the universe. He is a symbol of Allah's promise that He Himself will protect His house and His religion. He is a living embodiment of the promise He made to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam when he laid the foundation of this house. This guardian teaches us that the battle of faith is not just fought in the world of humans. It is being fought constantly in the worlds of the Jinn and the angels as well. This conflict between truth and falsehood is a cosmic one, where all of creation has chosen a side. The next time a believing soul stands before the Kaaba, when they step forward to kiss the sacred black stone, when they stand to pray behind the Maqam Ibrahim, let them remember for a moment they are not alone. They are standing in a place protected not only by humans, but by the unseen armies of Allah. They are circling a house that is guarded by an entity who stopped Abraha's elephant, foiled the plots of sorcerers, and repelled the barbarism of the Mongols. This realization fills the heart of a believer with a new strength. He understands that his prayer is not just rising to the heavens, but that there are unseen beings surrounding him, saying Ameen in unison with him. The sun rises and sets over Makkah every day. Empires fall and new ones are built. Human history changes every moment, but that unseen guardian does not change. He remains at his post, an eternal sentinel. As long as there is even one believer on earth who turns to this house and says, Allahu Akbar, the guardian of the Kaaba will remain steadfast in his duty. His story will continue. His fire of faith from which he was created will burn for all eternity. A living flame bearing eternal witness to the oneness of Allah and the sanctity of His house.